Let's get some more insight now on one of this week's big stories. Here's the headline in the Financial Times. India's top court sentences tycoon Vijay Mallya to 4 months in jail. Joined on the line now by a lawyer in Chandigarh who's been following this one closely, not involved in the case, but following it closely. Managing partner at Sarin & Co, the law firm, Nitin Sarin. Nitin, good morning. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Richard. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Going to get your thoughts in a second. First of all, though, Vijay Mallya, flamboyant tycoon, made his money in the beverage industry, but then lost it in the airline industry with Kingfisher Airlines. Netflix made a documentary about him. They called it Bad Boy Billionaires. I'm going to play you a little bit of it now. What you're going to hear, first of all, is Vijay Mallya himself, who's in London at the moment, has been for many, many years, outside a court where he's fighting extradition, and then a couple of people commenting on his downfall.
The allegations are baseless, and you will see our submissions in court. I will not allow you to make any sort of judgments based on my comments.
The only difference between a petty criminal and Vijay Mallya is that he wears a suits and throws lavish parties.
But that one airline just did him in. If that hadn't gone wrong, Vijay would have been king till today. Everybody would have been bowing down and touching his feet, even now.
So, Nitin, you've been following this one closely. This decision by India's Supreme Court to sentence Vijay Mallya to 4 months in prison for disobeying a court judgment from 5 years ago linked to the collapse of Kingfisher Airlines. How significant is this?
Well, Richard, it's just another thorn, in Dr. Mallya's, as I say, foot. He's already in a lot of trouble. And, the Supreme Court decision actually came in 2017, where they found him guilty on 2 counts of contempt of court. Now, I'll just quickly explain. Contempt of court is really a court's power of, managing its own affairs. And if someone does not obey its orders or there's some indiscipline, it has the power of contempt. Now, Dr. Mallya was found guilty on 2 counts of disobeying orders of the Supreme Court, as well as violating orders of the Karnataka High Court back in 2017. Now, because of COVID, the sentencing couldn't happen till 11th of July 2022. So it is very significant. There have been a lot of questions as to why a paltry sum of rupees 2,000, which is just barely $25. But that is the maximum amount of fine that a court can award under the Contempt of Court Act 1971. So while it is a very newsworthy item, it's just another thing Dr. Mallya is going to have to deal with should he ever want to come back to India.
So he remains in the United Kingdom, where he's been for many, many years now. He is fighting extradition, and we'll see how that one goes. But there's 2 sides to this story, Nitin, aren't there? So this is what the FT says. The Indian government alleges that Vijay Mallya was the central figure in a, quote, dishonest plot along with bankers at one of India's biggest banks to obtain large loans for Kingfisher Airlines. And when it went bankrupt, it owed $1.1 billion. So, yes, the airline did go bankrupt, and yes, it did owe the money. Vijay Mallya, though, says it wasn't a dishonest plot. It was simply a business that failed, and businesses do fail, and it failed in good faith. And lawyers for Mr. Mallya argue that he has been scapegoated by a government eager to make an example of the tycoon. What's the consensus in India? Do they see Vijay Mallya as simply a businessman who had a business that failed, or something more roguish than that?
Well, that's a very interesting point that you raise. There are 2 schools of thought. Now, the largest school of thought is obviously, the huge amounts of employees who are owed salaries, the huge amounts of other, vendors who were never paid, etc. So they have a large grudge, and they are definitely on the camp of who find Dr. Mallya to be completely, a thief. There's the other school of thought who is more on the, entrepreneurial side, who are very concerned with some of the actions. When you're running a business, you want to be completely sure that you have the backing of all authorities and that you can take all the risks possible, provided you have certain checks and balances. So there are 2 schools of thought about this, but without a doubt, the largest school of thought is the one that is centered around the employees, the huge amount of money, and the loss to the public exchequer.
Mr. Mallya isn't the only Indian billionaire who's in the United Kingdom at the moment and the subject of a multi-billion-dollar case. You've got Nirav Modi as well, who is in the jewellery business. He's also fighting extradition from London to India, where he's wanted over charges of a $2 billion fraud linked to Punjab National Bank. What do we know about this case, Nitin, if anything?
I think that it's like comparing apples and oranges. I feel they're two totally different cases. The only common aspect between both the cases is that they're fighting extradition. So without going into the merits of the Nirav Modi case, it's only the extradition from the United Kingdom which is the common factor. Where I must also highlight that Dr. Mallya has lost in all courts and has exhausted all avenues regarding extradition. So he is to be extradited back. The only thing is his lawyers seem to have found some loophole in some regulation whereby the authorities are saying that they cannot extradite him until one legal issue has been resolved. They are very tight-lipped about that issue and have come on record to say that it's a secret, confidential matter.
Finally, Nitin, in terms of the banking sector and the way that it handles loans, particularly to very, very high-profile individuals in India and very high-profile corporations, what will be the legacy of these cases and others, if anything? Will anything change?
Yes, a lot has already changed. It has become a lot harder for people to get, loans. It's become definitely extremely difficult for the aviation industry to raise money. And we are all hoping against hope that, the Indian banking sector comes back into the field of aviation and other, aspects which have been marred by such incidents. And, more money is lent and more checks and balances are put in place. As they say, if you've already given the loan, that means you've done all of your homework. And in these cases, they had not done their homework.
Nitin, always great talking to you. Appreciate your time this morning, joining us live on the line from Chandigarh in India. That is the managing partner of the law firm Sarin & Co., Nitin Sarin.